Hi, Denise.
Hi, everybody.
Hey, Denise.
Hey Denise, how's it
All
going?
right.
Good, how are you?
Well, thank you.
The Board of Health was finishing up in the training room, so I'm gonna go put a sign out that says that we moved down here. But I don't think anybody will come. I think people are on the webinar. There's two viewers, so. I'm gonna go put a sign up.
Thank you so much.
All right. Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year. Hope you guys had a good Christmas and New Year celebration.
Everything we did. It was great. Actually, thanks. How about you guys?
Yeah, a fun time. I got to see family, friends, took last week off too, so it was relaxing, got to decompress.
That's
hang
good.
out. Yeah.
Good. I took most of the week off until I had to go pick up the the tests at MEMA.
Did you have to
Didn't
fight
plan on
anybody
that.
for all those tests?
What's that?
Did you have to fight anybody for those tests?
I showed up early. I got there. They opened at 9. I got there at 8:30. I was already the 30th district in line. But
Oh, wow.
But the minute it opened at 9, it kind of flowed. I was out of there by 9:45 probably.
There you go.
So,
Could've been worse.
I just wanted to make sure we got what we were supposed to
Yeah,
get.
no, thank you very much for that.
Oh no, it was important. So yeah. If you hear dramatic music, my son's taking a piano class and I think they're doing movie scores.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's all like, I don't know if you can hear it.
No, I can't.
A lot of like, it's like the scene where the guy or the girl learns like the big plot twist and it's very dramatic. So that's what's going on.
We're just gonna start to hear the Jaws.
Yeah, a lot of John Williams in the background.
Yeah, right.
If we do see a shark behind you, we will yell. So don't
Please.
worry. We got you. We got you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So it wasn't quite a shark, but we made it over to the Birchwood yet?
No, I'm excited to though.
Yeah, I'm gonna go there for lunch tomorrow with the friends. Yeah, I'm excited to the first week.
Yeah, I'm excited for that too.
Adam, I think it's the same bakery that's over in Worcester. It's been the farmer's market there.
Yeah,
If it is, it's spectacular.
Okay.
So I'm excited. I'm gonna check it out this week.
Yeah,
Good.
they have like a good a broad array of stuff.
Mhm.
So yeah, that'll be good. And I live right around the corner from it, so I'm very happy with that.
Sorry, I meant to print this. So I'm just gonna do that. I didn't know if you would start without me.
I'm ready to. I didn't want to. I wasn't sure if you wanted me to, but do you want me to kick it off with the policy overview?
I do, because that's you've done that
Sets the
before.
stage.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I was prepared to do that. So just to look at the agenda quickly, you see that we have this policy overview, and Denise has sat through this her first time on policy, but certainly, you know, it's always a great refresher for all of us just to kind of get a sense of this, the goals and also the organization of the policies and how they're set and kind of what all of each of our roles is. These are your policies. We implement them as practice, but certainly that's why we appreciate having a meeting like this where we can all come together. And I found these to be really helpful when it comes down to implementing things or practicing things, is to refer back. So with that said, I'm going to put a link to the presentation in our agenda, and then I'll also present it so that it's easy to follow along, okay? I'll just make it this. And you probably need rights.
Or are you putting something in the,
I just linked it in the agenda, our working agenda for them, so they have something to kind of follow along with, but I
Okay.
will present.
all right, perfect.
I just want to make sure that they have the link, doing that now. I probably could have done this, Sarah, when you were out.
Lucas, it says I need access.
Yes, I'm giving all three of you access right now.
I'm still fumbling with the technology, so it's all right.
All right, so you should have access, and I'll share my screen now, so we're good to go.
Beautiful.
All right. Is this showing up full screen for you?
Mhm.
Okay. All right. So just with regard to policy, as I said, these policies really govern everything we do operationally in the school district is governed through these policies. You'll see on the next slide, it goes through the table of contents, which gives you an idea of just how these policies are implemented and the reach they have across the district in a variety of ways. And it's our job as policy development, and it's, as I said, it's your policy, but it's really an ongoing dynamic process. You're never completely done policy review. It seems like just as soon as you complete a set of policies, either some new regulations come down, or we've learned something new along the way, or they're cause for revision or at least review. And that's what we do. So the process continues on and on. Denise Miller, our secretary, started dating them probably about, I want to say 15 years ago, Sarah. I'm not positive, but I think over a decade ago, so that we have the review revised and the dates. Those that don't have a date on them, there's probably very few, but when you catch something like that, it's like an Easter egg, because it predates the 15-year or so mark and whatnot. So with that said, as we move on, just to orient you to the manual, you each will receive a hard copy manual if you haven't already. And we basically, it's the national board has an organization, so every district uses a very similar structure to how they're organized. There's basically 12 major classifications. You can look on the right and see some of those, ranging from personnel to student-specific instruction, community. You'll see in there facilities development, fiscal management. Every part of the system is pretty much a policy related to provide some guidance. There's also subclasses. So when you see policies, or you've heard them referenced at school committee, where it'll be policy AB or ABD down the line, basically subclasses fall into subclasses to keep things so that you can continually revise and review and not have to change the whole number system when you insert a new one in between. And finally, that filing and that way of coding really helps us. And now that we've gone online, we have the ability to search these policies pretty quickly. And those are online. It's under the school committee tab, and you can see those policies as well. So I think I'm getting ahead of myself. There's two ways to look. You have a paper copy, obviously. I really like that when I'm in an in-person meeting. But certainly throughout the day, when we're trying to just reference a policy, it's very convenient to be able to go online and look. We have our website right there. You can link into and get a sense of each of those policies. It's also a search tab in our Civic Plus website system that allows us to quickly search. And the beauty of that is if you typed in any word that you were looking for, therapy dog, it would show you the minutes from any notes that were digitized. It'll show you a category of the school committee policies, and it will go through and give you a lot of information. So just a tip as you're researching, if you do. So as I said, these policies are really meant to help govern us and make sure that the policies set by you as school committee really help help to inform the work that we do. So we have two different parts to the policy manual. One is the actual policies, and I'll let you read that definition. But basically, these policies really chart the course of action, as it says, for us as leaders. And we often refer to these, and it really helps us kind of set the stage for what's your intention, what's the expectation of the school committee in our day-to-day problem solving, and as we go through these pieces. The procedural pieces, oftentimes when you see a procedure, it could be regulated through the government, it could be legislation, it could be a requirement, and you'll see those noted at your footmarked at the bottom. But certainly there's procedures as well that help us go through and talk about, show us kind of the nuts and bolts and the how-tos when it's appropriate. There are times where you will have a policy that states superintendent or their designee will develop procedures. That means that it wasn't a state regulation, but there's an expectation that we have a process that we need to complete and have in place. And those live, because of the way we're designed as a system, we need the ability to create procedures when they're not regulated so that we have the ability to implement the right staff and the right personnel to meet the objective, which is the policy. You'll see these signs and symbols. So an R represents a reference. An E is an exhibit. For example, our new registration form, it'll say an exhibit would be, here's the registration that hits on all of the protected classes, for example, or veteran status. You'll see an example of that. You'll also see an also is the word. And what that means is there's a policy that's been duplicated, but they changed the reference. So it went from ACD and now it's in IJF. For maybe it was better categorized. And you'll see that from time to time where the policy is duplicated in two sections, depending on its definition or what the pieces are. But if it says also, they're identical. You'll see that underlined. It's really important that they're identical. So at the bottom, the references, you'll notice I talked about dates. This is just to assure that we have the most updated. And when you get a printed copy, you'll see in there, obviously, a printed date. As we update these on the website, we also change that. You'll see legal references, contract references. If it's part of the personnel section, there might be some bargaining language in there from the teacher contract that makes its way, and we have to reference that. And then cross-referencing. You'll see this from time to time where one policy states something and you want to connect it to another policy because they share an interest in what's being said. So it gives the reader an opportunity to look at that policy and then check any policy that's connected to it in some way that may impact it. And you'll see that as well at the bottom. Any questions so far? Pretty okay. So moving forward, the order of precedence. We look at policies and regulations. Like I said, we look at our contracts, and obviously Mass General Law are the three real drivers of any type of policy that we need to implement. When there's an inconsistency or there's language that's unclear, or we're not sure what was meant when the folks in the room originally drafted it, we always go to the law, and that prevails obviously for obvious reasons. If there's a local policy in a negotiated agreement, we look at the members of the particular bargaining unit. We try to look at what was interpreted at that time, or what does the contract say, and try to come to a resolution. I haven't experienced that one yet. Sarah, I don't know if you have an example related to that, but it would just be the contracts, the legal documents that are the contracts are basically what we have to refer to, and they prevail when it comes to us to writing the policy.
I can't say that anything's come up in implementation, but we've had conversations in review and development that there's a conflict, and so we need to change.
Yes.
Yeah, but I can't think of anything implementation-wise that's come up.
Okay. That's a good example, though, because sometimes the contracts do change, and then as we're reviewing these policies, we catch these things.
We have one
tonight.
We have one tonight, so we modified the FMLA language in the contract, and so our suggestion tonight is to just swap it out and be identical so that it's, that's consistent.
Perfect example. Thank you. So the review, you'll notice at the bottom of a policy, once we're done reviewing, there are a couple of scenarios that can play out. There's a review and no revision, which means just that. You've read it, we've looked at it, but we want to make sure we put a date on it so that the next person that looks knows that somebody put eyes on this. Not only somebody, the policy subcommittee of the school committee put eyes on it on this date so that they know, okay, this is it. The second is review revised. These are when there's not a substantive change, but something that needed to be revised. A lot of times you'll see gender nomenclature that will say his, her, will change to their, things of that nature. There are other examples as well, and I think as we review policies, you'll see some of that play out. Those are ones that don't necessarily need to go in front of the school committee as part of the larger authority's business, but it's, you've been charged as the representatives for the policy subcommittee, and within that, if there's no substantive change, you guys are, it's okay to put that. The third example is review, revised, adopted. And you'll see here where it talks about you found some substantive changes. And then from that point, it needs to go in front of the school committee for two viewings, basically. We always refer to it as, you probably heard, first read and second read. And in those cases, you've put it out there for the first read. The next meeting, potentially, with barring no issues, it can receive the school committee's full approval. And at that point, it becomes adopted. And then we put the adoption date, the second read night, whatever night that was approved. You've already voted on a few, and those are examples of that. And then we date them and keep that as part of it. So a very organized system, and it's one that exists pretty consistently across the Commonwealth, and it works in that way. So our process, policies are reviewed. They can come from three ways. One, there's been a change in some contract, legislation, and whatnot. It needs to go on our agenda as an immediate item. The second example could be that something's come up and you as members wish to see it put on the agenda, and then we can review things that way. And the third way would be we follow a logical progression. So if you looked at the agenda, it'll say, for example, we're going to review the G policies, or we're going to finish, I think we're in G now, right? So
This is the end. This is the end of G.
the end of G, there we go. So we're at the end of G, and that's an example. So then we would move on from there. So let's see, did I lose my page? Where was I? I was here, sorry for jumping. So I went through this, the second bullet already, went through first read, second read. I just explained this slide, so I feel like that's, any questions so far? We have one more slide. Okay. Okay, and I talked about this. Is it ever complete? It's not. We continue to revise. Sometimes we'll review and revise one or adopt one, and then you'll find within 6 months something needs to be changed or whatnot. So they're never truly done, and it's part of the work. It's ongoing, and sometimes it's slow. Sometimes you catch a rhythm with certain sections that it flows a little better. But you know, we take this review seriously because it does really govern and dictate, you know, your expectations as a school committee, and we want to make sure that we follow that and honor that. So that's the final slide. Are there any questions about policy in general or the review process? Okay.
Steve or Denise online?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I have a question. So you mentioned the difference between revised and adopted is a substantive change is made. Do we have like guidelines as to what defines a substantive change?
Anything, I don't have a definition, like we don't have a policy definition in the policy. We've operated off of anything that changes the meaning in any way that's substantive, and the chair is the person who recommends it. So if there's one that we're not sure on, we defer to the chair, and the chair will say, probably ask both of you, what do you think? And then ultimately the decision lies with the chair on whether it gets recommended. You'll notice as we get through a policy, there'll be a little pause and we wait to hear from David to say, are we good to go? Yep, put it on for first read. And then I'll type it right in the box and it'll get done. So substantive, anything that changes the meaning or the definition, or you added a reference or, legal reference or something.
Okay, thank you.
Good question. Probably the only part that's less defined out of the whole process, really.
Yeah, that's why I was wondering. Thank you.
Yep. All right.
So
So
let's see. I have
good.
okay. It's just a couple myself, and thank you so much, Lucas, for putting that together. Really appreciate that. One, the actual is there like a digital hard copy of these, or do they just kind of exist online, or is there like a Google Doc that has each written policy?
So it's online and viewable. However, you will receive as a policy subcommittee member, you will receive a binder that's a 3-inch binder that has every single up-to-date copy. We held off. We knew we had our first meeting today. So we thought let's get through this meeting, and then anything that needs to be updated, I've asked Denise to go through and make sure everything that's been done through the fall is in there and up to date, so that you can start the next meeting with the most up to date. It felt like the best thing we could do to kind of move this along.
No, that's great. Thank you.
Yep.
And when we do we make a substantive change, and we have the historical. I know we have the dates. Do we have do we keep the historical policies themselves? What we
Yes.
had versus what we then trained.
Yeah.
We do. Okay.
Yep, that's a great question, and that comes up every now and again. So there is a master Word file
Okay.
that has previous policies that sometimes comes up. It doesn't come up a lot, but there have been some sort of legal situations, and I've had to provide the policy at the time that an incident may have happened versus the current one.
Okay.
It does come up,
Okay.
so we can go back and look.
And then last one too. I know some policy, for instance, the one of the ones to be reviewed today have dictated timelines for how often they're reviewed. The bullying policy, it states every 2 years. Are there, generic question, are there a lot of those policies that kind of explicitly state how often they're reviewed? And if so, do we kind of have a ticker for them on a calendar, or is it just something that typically will come up within the 2-year period?
I think that the bullying policy doesn't, I think it's the bullying plan that needs to get reviewed every 2 years,
Oh,
not
okay.
necessarily the policy.
That's correct.
I can't think of any other policies that have a time frame.
Okay.
We will
The-
do a coordinated program review. They don't call it that anymore. It's a tiered focus monitoring review with the Department of Education, and we actually have one coming up. That is every 5 years, and that is a natural time for some of these policies to be reviewed.
Okay.
It's either in advance or because of the monitoring review.
Okay.
They might find something that's inconsistent with the current expectations.
And when we get to the bullying policy, we can review that. But you are correct, Sarah. The intervention plan, the forward-facing document for the public, is the one that needs to be reviewed every 2 years. The policy doesn't, but it's good practice to also do that as well. But the policy itself is not bound to that same timeline as the plan is. And this is our year to review our current bullying plan. So, and there's a plan that we can talk about that when we get there. But.
Awesome. And one, I promise, last question. How often do you guys kind of typically go through the alphabet of the policies? About, from A to H, how long does that often take?
And that's another good question. It is a long
I'm
process.
sure.
So when I started, we did the B policies, but we jumped around a little bit. So when I was interviewing, they were in the I policies. That's when they were focusing on homework. And then we bumped up to B because it just was good to establish board governance and all of that. So we did B, and then we hopped back down. It takes a long time, but I think that there's maybe in the policy goals section, there may be an expectation for how frequently it's reviewed, like maybe every 3 years. But I could be making that up.
I was just going to check while you were talking, but since I've been on, we hit on when things came up related to students. A lot of times there'll be a student service one or something to that effect that needs to be. So we're constantly drawn to ones that become a priority. But at the core, I think I jumped in, Sarah, you were doing the operations, you were finishing operations. Would that make sense?
I think we're doing E.
Yeah, support services.
Yeah, and I think we skipped F purposefully because G was never had not ever been reviewed. It appeared there were many policies in G that had no date on them.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, that made sense because if you're looking at ones that there'll be a whole slew of them from 2012, it makes sense to put eyes on some of those. So
I think we prioritize these.
Yeah, those are good questions.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay. All right. So that the overview is over. And Sarah, did you want to jump into phase coverings?
Sure. I don't have much. I suggested that we put it on when I sent this to Dave before vacation because I didn't know if there would be any update, but I wanted to leave room for some update, and I don't have one, except to say that masks are still required at least through January 15th, and I anticipate that the commissioner will come out with some more information prior to that. I also would project, and I don't think this is like an amazing forecast, but I don't project that we'll be at 4%, below 4% anytime soon. So
Okay.
masks stay on for the foreseeable future.
All right.
I don't know if anybody wanted to talk further about the policy, but that's all I have as an update.
Dave.
So just for clarification, so this is the existing policy on masks because we have, well, it's the policy we adopted, but also because there's the requirement through January 15th. And so say hypothetically, the January 15th doesn't get extended. Does this by default sunset or does this by default keep going?
It keeps going at the local level.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So you'd have to amend your policy, but it keeps going at the local level.
All right. And then we would have to later on vote to repeal, like later on down the line when believed to be appropriate.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And Denise, any questions?
No, thank you. None for me. As someone who's been through it a few times, I don't have any questions.
All right. So next policy we have is bullying. I know that this was put on as a request to review. So are you all able, in the agenda it's linked, so I'm going to just pop it up on my screen so I can take a look, but it should be in the agenda. Usually we copy and paste below the text of it if you look in the actual agenda so that we can make any edits and we have a kind of a running record so that we're all on the same page and seeing the edits together. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
And Lucas, just on that note too, so if there's let's say some like typo, like little grammatical fixes here, that would be something we could just kind of insert right into like a comment or revision directly into this document and be able to move from there. Okay.
Exactly. And any of us can, I'm happy to, if it's easier, I can do it while we're talking. If I catch what's happening, usually it's easier in person, but certainly, go ahead.
Sorry, Lucas, I think we tend to do it though more as a suggestion, or we highlight the change just so Dee can follow it, because this is not her master document that she uses. She needs to translate our work into Word.
Mm-hmm.
So we highlight it for her. But Lucas is good at catching us.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm happy to. like I was gonna make a note here just to make sure these are checked to be the most up to date. The classes, they look correct, but it's just like one of those things. I could pull up I think it's AC, but
Oh, I think that they're fine.
I think so too. I'm seeing.
They're fine.
All right, so first, any kind of questions, comments about the bullying policy? Dave,
Have we, since last time well, you mentioned there was a request to review. Have there been specific instances or changes over the past couple of years that have caused someone to specifically request the review, or like is there a specific change in mind?
I can kind of answer that one. So I had requested that this be included, just based on some conversations I was hearing from the community members.
Okay.
One of the bigger things that when I was looking at this and kind of asking it to come online was questioning more about some of the timeframes from when an incident is reported to when like the investigation begins and when like the actual like reported document then kind of begins to move outside the school or to wherever it needs to go.
Okay.
Some school districts have a specific date from what I had looked at. And I believe in our policy, it's just listed as promptly. And so I just kind of wanted I wanted to toss it up here so we can kind of talk about that, get kind of some background feedback about the actual timelines of reporting for the census to answer that question.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm happy to chime in. Few pieces on this. So we have the official document up online. The timeline piece is very general. I think I have a draft for us to put together with our school stakeholders to really get some input on some drafted language. And I began working on it to tee it up for more of a transparent review that includes some stakeholders. One piece that I became aware of too was the timeline and how promptly, for example, I'll use your example, Dave, is very general and doesn't give a lot of time-bound element to it. I think that there's the opportunity to look at language without, what I wouldn't want to do is bind us to something where it's a Friday afternoon at 7 p.m. and we're not able to get, like, I think you got to be careful if you say like within 24 hours or something when you don't have the ability. But I think that we could add a little clarity, I think, to help guide this. That's just my opinion, but certainly that. And the other piece is just in the document that we have, having examined a lot of other bullying policies from other districts that had a recent review, front loading some of the definitions and the online submission and pointing to some of the things up front as opposed to having them buried a little bit deeper in our bullying and intervention plan. So there's some pieces there. I think it's during this review, these are all considerations that need to be looked at.
Yeah, I think that this bullying policy kind of checks the boxes in terms of what's required. Legally, there's certain pieces that need to be in there, including vulnerable populations. But I think that's how it reads to me. But it could have, with a different lens and some development, some additional pieces.
Also, just for kind of clarity's sake, now is this something too that we can continue to work on and develop at each meeting that we have to kind of keep it on the agenda so we can just continue to formulate it to, like Lucas, like you said, to kind of work out with some other stakeholders to start to kind of prep things so that it always kind of stays at the forefront, that we're able to continue to work on it and to modify it each week.
I think the intervention plan itself, I'm envisioning based on the policy, the way it reads, if we look at the school committee policy and then the plan are different documents, as we said. But when I look at the policy, if you scroll down to, where's the review? Sorry, it's the bottom of, it's at the end, it's the final paragraph. Develop, adhere, and update a plan to address bullying prevention and intervention in consultation with district stakeholders. The plan shall be reviewed and updated at least biannually. And so that to me is an opportunity for us to put together, to consult with district stakeholders and make sure that the plan addresses the timeline, and make sure that that gets in there. So that would be my suggestion is taking that draft. That's our next step in 2022, this half of the year, and really try to update the policy and then get feedback and eyes on that. So I'm not sure, Sarah, from your perspective of, I think having input from all stakeholders, you're all stakeholders as well, would be important. But certainly I would want to distinguish the policy from that intervention and response plan, which should talk about timeline and should talk about investigations and outcomes and how things are determined and supports for victims and aggressors and whatnot in more detail.
Yeah, I think it's a good example of like policy and then the procedures piece. So the intervention plan becomes kind of that procedural implementation component. I think what I'd like to do is get some examples, if the question is specifically about time frame being in the policy, what are some examples from some other communities and how do they read? I think a lot of this comes right out of the legal requirements. And like I said, it sort of checks the boxes legally, have a legal review too. Like bring it back for a second conversation.
Yeah. I have some pretty good language that actually hits on if you get a report in the afternoon or at night, or if it's a weekend, and it gives latitude to how that would be handled, just for transparency. So what people could expect if they were, and maybe that's something we could explore as well. But that would be definitely one I think would be most appropriate in the plan itself,
right. The
document that people look at, parents refer to if they're an aggressor or an alleged victim or alleged aggressor. But and it's hard that we're not talking about that document right now, so it's hard without an example. But I agree with Sarah.
Can we get a copy of the prevention and intervention plan and the flow chart to review at some point, just to kind of see what it looks like?
Yes, I can I'll link the one that's current in there, and then like I said, I have a document that was taken from that's in draft form with some edits and suggestions along the way, but it needs to go for more of a full process with stakeholders as the policy reads. But we've begun that work and teed that up so that these considerations get in there. The example Dave gave was a good one, so I'll link that in there now. Okay. This is the current one. That's not reorganized, but that's the one that's in there. You can take a look. I might bring you to the tab, and if you look on the left, bullying prevention intervention plan. Brings you to the web page. So top left. But as far as JICFB, the policy itself, I think that what Sarah had referenced, it meets the legal requirements as far as.
I believe, it was reviewed and revised in 2018. I don't think that legal requirements have changed, but we can double check.
So,
Please.
So apart from the plan update and procedures, have there been any things in regard to the policy that have been brought to your attention that need updating that maybe mentioned at the school level, right?
No. So I think we're aware that more of the plan needs some updating, but not this.
Okay.
And Denise, did you have a comment or question?
Yeah, I was just looking at the MASC policies and their JICFB is very different than ours.
Is there a date on it, Denise?
Let me get to the bottom. It is 2013. Okay, so that's probably why. All right, ignore me. Yeah.
Denise, you bring up a good point around actually MASC. We do look at that as well. The Massachusetts School Committee policy, we'll refer to that as well. If it's not outdated or predates something, we use that as a reference as well sometimes.
And actually, just on that note, sorry, a quick tangent. With when I was on their website earlier, they have a collection of a number of districts that in their policies, and it's kind of organized on their own website. They do say that it comes with a fee. Has that been looked at before, and it's just not cost effective, and we just do it ourselves?
We haven't looked at it. I don't know what the fee is.
Okay.
I can find out, but I don't. We haven't looked at it.
Haven't looked at. Okay.
Yeah.
No, and what we have on our website is great. I was just curious about that as well.
Make a note.
I actually would be interested in sort of taking a look at how much it is to store it. I think our website, there's sometimes like some formatting issues that come up based on Civic Plus. I don't really know why, but that frustrates me at times.
It does, yeah. The formatting gets to me sometimes too. Storing. Just going to make a note.
And also, there's one other question too, just in terms of as we're kind of going through, like, Lucas, a lot of the, I feel like the gender nomenclature being updated. And so, is this something that we can kind of go and update and add to these documents outside of, say, like the 6 to 7:30 band that we're actively meeting for the policy subcommittee?
It's a great question. We typically haven't. But hypothetically, if it's literally about changing gender nomenclature, I would propose we could do it and then bring a stack to you and just as kind of informative, have Dee work on it.
Yeah.
So
Like
yeah,
if we did, go ahead.
No, well, yeah. So if I were to, because I had a few other ones, I kind of noticed some of those, and extra little space between the words, capitalization. So if they're tiny little things like that, I could just kind of add to this document, and then we could just kind of compile it together to say if it can be kind of put forward or adopted.
Oh, I think I misinterpreted. I thought you meant like going through the whole manual and changing like formatting for tone, like related to gender.
Oh, I see.
Through like other policies that aren't kind of on the radar screen for review, but just because we think it's.
Oh, like a Control F and just kind of pull it down and go in
Yeah.
one. Oh, okay.
That's what I was thinking
Yeah.
about. But so if you have things, it might be good to do them now.
Okay.
If you have some suggestions or changes. I would just also note if it was pulled off of the web, again, the format, it's like a formatting thing and like a bullet, we can take that back and sort of clean it up.
And fix it up.
Yeah, because it may have been copied. I
Yeah.
know, in fact, Dee pulled the bullying one off of the web Monday, and for example, there were no paragraphs.
Yes,
So
that's, yeah.
I introduced some paragraphs.
Thank you very much for that.
And I think when she did that mass update to the website, there was so many policies that went in, it had to be done. But now that we can take a breath and look at specific sections, I think to your point, it makes sense to go in. And if we can do some grammatical or formatting things, take care of that.
Okay, well, I mean, along those lines, I did notice, unless if we, okay, just in the last paragraph on the first page of the bullying thing, so what's on page 3 here, and I also just had a quick question about this. So in well, I guess, in part B of that last paragraph, I was thinking MGLs, I was gonna say subsection, so gotta adapt my nomenclature here. So so because in A it says, and when it's defined, bullying causes physical or emotional harm to the target or damage to the target's property, then B, place the target in reasonable fear of harm to himself or damage to his property. So I mean, so that's 2 points that could also be updated for the gender nomenclature. Also question on that part B, because it says, because in A it mentions specifically physical or emotional harm, and then A is causes physical or emotional harm, then B is places the target in reasonable fear of harm. Is harm, is it just, because it doesn't specify physical or emotional there, is it just kind of assumed because physical and emotional is already mentioned, that both are covered, or would it be worth also putting in physical or emotional there, or substantively does it not make much of a difference? Or your thoughts on that?
So I think this is directly taken from the law.
Okay.
So it's worded in this way because it mirrors the law. I think,
Yep. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think it implies physical harm.
And yeah, maybe for the purposes of the procedures in the plan, it doesn't make a practical difference, but I was just wondering if for the sake of consistency, if that should be added or not, and just a question in that regard.
My suggestion would be to leave it as close to the legal definition as possible, just to cover those bases.
Okay.
Well, then, also a question. This is on paragraph 2. There's the listing, hate crimes based on race, color, creed, religion, ancestry. Later on down, let's see. Then kind of a little towards the second half, they also introduced socioeconomic, homelessness, physical appearance. And I didn't know if the fact that those two weren't identical, was that an oversight, or is that, again, intentional, kind of how the law is designed?
I believe that that's intentional. Race, gender, those subsets compared to homelessness, I believe it's set that a hate crime is a specific criminal charge, and I think it's connected to those classes referenced in the first part. And then the second part where it references it's not referring to hate crimes, it's referring to all protected classes. That's my understanding, but
okay.
It's the target of by perceived differentiating characteristics. So that includes more subsets and more categories versus the top where it's referencing hate crimes.
Okay.
It's a good question. Good catch.
No, appreciate the explanation, because it kind of clears up some, because later on down the road, the terminology for hate crimes starts to kind of fade away, but then they're just kind of talking about the more broader issues